This is CBC Vancouver News.
Saying goodbye to Madison Scott more than a decade after she went missing. We take you to Vanderhoof, where loved ones have gathered at a vigil days after her remains were found. Plus,
it was so intense. I was terrified. Yeah, they just dived down, got the back of my neck, and then his wings were flapping in my hair.
'Tis the season for being attacked by dive-bombing crows. Why the angry birds seem to get even more aggressive this time of year. Good evening, I'm Tanya Fletcher. We begin tonight in northern BC, where loved ones are gathering at a candlelight vigil this hour to remember Madison Scott. This is the somber scene at Nechako Valley Secondary School right now. Friends and family of Maddie, as she was known, have come together in her honor. Maddie was 20 years old when she went missing after a party with friends at a remote campsite more than a decade ago. Since then, the community has led a long and agonizing search. Her remains were finally discovered and a search warrant executed just last week. RCMP have spent the past several days combing a rural property east of Vanderhoof. Police have released few details in the case, only saying the investigation is still open and active. There was quite a scene in the skies over Vancouver late today. A major construction site at the new Oak Ridge Centre redevelopment suddenly went up in flames.
It was in the middle of the construction site, so we believe it's just building materials, and at this time it's under investigation by the fire investigator. They had water on it within minutes.
Still, thick black smoke could be seen billowing into the sky from Oak Ridge Park on Cambie Street. This was around 3:30 this afternoon. Firefighters managed to quickly douse the blaze before too much damage was done. No one was injured, and the fire is not considered suspicious. Well, staffing shortages have been plaguing RCMP detachments right across the country recently. And this afternoon, BC Mounties went on a recruiting blitz in Surrey.
I'm just learning more about a career in policing because I'm interested in law enforcement. I grew up here, this is where I live. I want to make sure that I make a positive difference in my community and that I help make sure it stays safe.
This particular pop-up site drew crowds of curious policing prospects. RCMP are pitching the perks of living where you work as an incentive. More than 200 applicants turned out for today's career information sessions and workshops. We are getting well into spring here in Vancouver, yes, and that might mean, say, spending the day at the beach, or perhaps strolling along the seawall, or possibly being dive-bombed by angry crows. It's an annual, if not frightening, ritual as crow parents guard their babies this time of year. And as Liam Britton is finding out, these aerial avian attacks are an experience that few people are raving about.
The faces say it all. It's crow attack season. All over the Lower Mainland, people are getting swooped, swiped, dive-bombed. They're getting beaked up, and they're beaking off.
It was so intense. I was terrified. Yeah, they just dived down, got the back of my neck, and then his wings were flapping in my hair.
All over the city and beyond, the website Crow Tracks is recording dozens of attacks.
In the past couple of days, the crow attacks have been peaking. And they started about a month ago, but just in the past few days, it's really picked up. So those crows are busy out there.
All this corvid carnage might remind you of a horror film.
Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds in color.
But it's actually a story of passerine parenting. Turns out crows are the ultimate helicopter parents, vigilant, defensive, and commanding the sky.
I think right now they're very worried parents, because this nesting season is a very vulnerable time for them and their babies. While they're on the ground right now, learning how to fly, they're kind of hopping around. They're trying to warn people off and trying to prevent any type of danger to their little ones. So they'll often swoop down, they'll fly very close, they may even brush the back of your head, but they're really just trying to stay away.
They're even buzzing crow fans like Erin.
I'm thinking about it from their perspective. As an anxious parent, they're repeatedly telling me to stay away from their babies, and I keep coming back.
And while lots of innocent passers-by are seen as threats, there are risks to these fledglings.
They're easily, picked up by cats. Dogs will grab them, give them a good shake. Sometimes they'll hop out into traffic and get clipped by a car or even stepped on sometimes.
The Wildlife Rescue Association in Burnaby is hand-raising some of those unfortunates.
So they do spend quite a long time with us. Because crows are so intelligent, they learn a lot from their parents, which means that they're more difficult for a rehabilitator to care for. We have to be very careful about making sure that our faces and everything are covered when we go in so that they don't associate people with food.
So if you're in the crosshairs of these protective parents, the advice is to change your habits to stay away from nesting spots, or carry an umbrella, and have a bit of sympathy for these poor crows. Anyone raising little ones will tell you that parenting is murder. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, meanwhile, experts are warning of increased black bear sightings around the province. Since the beginning of May, there have been more than a dozen bear sightings on the southern part of Vancouver Island alone.
Bears are in our communities primarily not for food, but for safety. They don't have any problem with people overlapping areas that they live. Other bears, there's a little bit of bear politics that can happen, but with people, they're very respectful if they've been taught rules like they do in nature.
The BC Conservation Service says you should be taking steps to make sure you're eliminating any possible bear bait, like store garbage in a locked area, keep bins empty until pickup day, or even freeze your garbage. Residents who leave out bear attractants could face fines of up to $575. Well, still on the island, some good news on the wildfire front. Fire crews say the Newcastle Creek fire has not had any significant growth overnight. Crews are still working to suppress the flames, but at this point, they say all containment lines are holding. The Coastal Fire Center says the wildfire was human-caused, but they are still investigating specifics on that. They do warn conditions are very dry. A high fire danger rating is covering most of the island from Port Hardy to Victoria and, in fact, most of BC. And let's take a look at your latest forecast. We'll start with that satellite radar to give you just that wide perspective of how nice today was and really the whole weekend and in through the week. It's because of a high pressure system that's really blanketing much of BC. You can see some pockets of low pressure trying to push in from that swirling low off the Pacific coast, and also another system that's pushing up from through Alberta from the southeast there. But overall, we're going to see nice temperatures, lots of blue sky, lots of sunshine heading into the next few days. So we'll have your 5-day forecast coming up. Well, celebrating the great outdoors and highlighting just how crucial it is to protect public nature spaces. Today marks the 3rd anniversary of BC Trails Day. The CBC's Yasmin Gandam is hearing from people passionate about not only maintaining but also improving recreational hotspots right around the province.
It's another beautiful sunny day on the North Shore, which means bikers, hikers, and other outdoor enthusiasts are out enjoying scenic trails.
I like being in nature and being able to have fun riding your bike.
It really helps me ground after a stressful day at work.
A new survey by Ipsos shows nearly 7 out of every 10 adult BC residents have participated in outdoor recreation in the past 12 months. 93% recognize that trails require maintenance, with around half believing paid crews are maintaining the trails.
Trails just don't happen by themselves. They don't just appear in the forest. There's always a dedicated group behind the scenes that are working so hard to advocate for access.
The hope is BC Trails Day will help raise awareness on the need to protect the passages.
BC Trails Day is a great way just for people to learn about what goes into their favorite trail that they might use for walking their dog or, going mountain biking or hiking.
Volunteers from outdoor groups such as the North Shore Mountain Society spend hours on end collecting garbage and improving access.
So it feels like more infrastructure here could be really useful. Like some days you come and it's like a huge queue to get into the parking lot.
There are some trails that definitely need some maintenance, but I feel like they're well marked.
Failing to maintain the trails could result in dire consequences, such as injuries to users or trail shutdowns.
There's a rising interest in outdoor recreation, and we hear that across the province. And if spaces aren't prepared to take on this increased demand to the trail space, you can start to see negative impacts, such as environmental or cultural values that are being negatively impacted.
This comes as the province announced a one-time grant last month of $10 million to the Outdoor Recreation Council to improve and enhance outdoor recreation for people in BC. But the council says volunteers are still having to pick up the pieces.
So these are people in their communities that are seeing the need for more trail maintenance, and they're going and doing it in their communities.
Despite the potential maintenance issues, people of all ages continue to enjoy what the trails have to offer. Yasmin Gantam, CBC News, North Vancouver.
Well, festivities were held today in Vancouver's Emery Barnes Park downtown for BC's Access Festival.
So what we do is really highlight disability culture, seeing disabled artists and community members as necessary and valid and valuable contributors to what is happening in our community to build worlds into better places.
No coincidence, this celebration is taking place on BC Access Day. It's a free community arts festival that includes a parade, shows, and poetry, all highlighting and celebrating artists with disabilities. In a statement, the province says it is committed to making sure that everyone can live, work, and play in a more inclusive and accessible place for all. Well, hundreds of cyclists in Langley, meanwhile, geared up and rode together in support of Fighting Blindness Canada.
The hope is to find a cure for my kids and for all people living with vision loss, because it impacts their lives in ways that we don't even know. It's just the everyday little task, a simple eye contact with people. It'll affect their path in life and their job opportunities. So it would just, all the money that we're raising would just mean the world to everyone living with vision loss.
This event is setting its sights on $180,000 in fundraising to boost vision research in Canada and bringing hope to 1.2 million Canadians who live with vision loss. Cycle for Sight West Coast is one of 5 such rides taking place right across the country. And British Columbian jazz legend Phil Nimmons is celebrating his 100th birthday today. The Kamloops-born clarinetist and composer won the first ever Juno Award for jazz and helped found a pioneering jazz school in Toronto. He's widely considered the dean of Canadian jazz. The composer and musician's career started in Vancouver in the 1940s. He studied music at New York's Juilliard School around the time that legendary jazz trumpeter Miles Davis was enrolled there. He formed a band named Nimmons N9 in the 1950s, and in 2002 he won the prestigious Governor General's Performing Arts Award for Lifetime Artistic Achievement. When it comes to cooking, we can all admit some recipes are easier than others, especially in my case. But imagine if you're neurodiverse or live with a disability. Well, a Duncan man has created a cookbook for just that. Video producer Mike MacArthur popped by to see what was on the menu.
Hello, my name is Jules Sherrod. I'm an award-winning food photographer and stylist and cookbook author and advocate for disability and trans rights. My new cookbook is called Trip Up the Kitchen: Tools, Tips, and Recipes for the Disabled Cook. Because I am disabled and I was having a really hard time finding tools and tips and recipes that were actually by a disabled person for a disabled person that actually worked. Everything out there was written by able people, and none of them worked for me, and none of them worked for my friends who are also disabled. There's 3 sections in the book. The first section has tools that I recommend that you equip your kitchen with, including pricing so that people can prioritize what they need for the kitchen based on their financial means. The second section is tips, and it has everything from how to organize your kitchen and your pantry so it's the most efficient and save time. And in a way that's not typical. I look at it at like a month instead of a week. And then the recipe section, which is 50 recipes, organized from the least amount of time and effort it takes to make them all the way to it require every single ounce of energy you have. And then when we get to the steps are really broken down. So it's like 1 step per step instead of the usual, where it's like 1 step, but there's 10 different steps hidden within that 1 step. All of the ingredients are broken up so that you don't get surprised with a step that you didn't prepare for in the recipe. So it just really simplifies the process so that it's just really like they don't have to do any extra thinking. They just have to sit down with the cookbook, and they are more likely to succeed rather than fail.
Still ahead, thousands forced out by wildfires in Nova Scotia remain out of their homes tonight, but rain is bringing some relief in the firefighting efforts. We'll take you to the other coast after the break. Welcome back. Let's take you across to the other side of the country tonight. In Nova Scotia, 10,000 people forced out of their homes by wildfires remain out tonight. There is some relief, though, in the form of rain. And because of that, the number of active fires is now down to 5, one of them still out of control. As the CBC's Sam Sampson tells us, fighting that blaze, though, is expected to be a long battle.
This rain is very welcome in Shelburne because not too far from here, the largest wildfire Nova Scotia has ever seen continues to burn. The fire near Barrington Lake is more than 23,000 hectares in size, making it the largest wildfire on record in this province. And it's growing. Today, another mandatory evacuation order. At least 6,700 people have been forced out of their homes, about half the size of this county. Now, to fight that historic fire and others in Shelburne County, this is what it takes to house all of the resources that's coming. So look at this. This is a combination of local volunteers as well as Halifax firefighters here to set up tents for about 300 firefighters coming in, not only from other parts of Canada, but also Costa Rica and some Americans as well. And we hear that even though with all of this rain coming down, there is still very much a need for extra help.
It's a fire that's on the ground and underground is where the real heavy work is going to take place, and that's where the labor really requires a lot of people to get into there and dig the embers and things like that.
So now there's only one out-of-control wildfire in Nova Scotia, and it is the one close to Shelburne County, that Barrington Lake fire. Now, because of that, a lot of the resources coming to Nova Scotia are coming to this area because the situation in Halifax has turned for the better. With the added moisture, firefighters have switched the status of the blaze threatening the Halifax area. It was out of control. Now it's held, not expected to spread. News that comes with tempered optimism.
It takes such an extensive amount of time for us to declare a fire out. So we could be here for weeks, we could be here for a couple of months before the incident commander is comfortable in saying this fire is out.
Some evacuees in Halifax were allowed to go to their homes on Friday, but still thousands are displaced. The Premier says that's because the situation is still unsafe.
We understand the urgency. Once it's deemed safe from a fire perspective, and the recommendation is made to municipality, there's also other steps to take to make sure it's just safe from other dangers.
These tents may be just an indication of all the work that is yet to come. 300 firefighters are expected to be able to stay in this ball diamond, which means that historic fire might take a long time to put out, and the people who are displaced in the southern area of Nova Scotia will have to wait quite a while to go home. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Shelburne, Nova Scotia.
To the fire situation in Quebec now, and there are more than 130 forest fires still burning out of control in that province. And the situation is still serious, yes. The overall area where the fires is burning is growing, but thankfully the flames did not move as quickly as initially feared. Paula Dion-Perez has the latest on that.
A roaring saving force. 2 water bombers were finally able to fly over Les Belles-sur-Quévillon this morning. The smoke had been so dense, planes couldn't reach the area.
When there is a thick blanketing smoke, it takes longer for aircraft to get up in the air because of visibility issues. We need everybody to be safe, and when you can't properly see when you're flying, then aircraft have to be grounded.
As the forest fire closed in on the small town of 2,000 people, most residents evacuated to neighboring Val-d'Or and Sainte-Terre. Les Belles-sur-Quévillon Mayor Guy Lafrenière addressed the community this afternoon. We were lucky, he said. The fire slowed down overnight. There were fears it would reach the Nordic Craft pulp mill, which contains explosive materials.
Le feu a passé aux côtés, je dirais, à peu près à 1,5 kilomètre de l'usine.
On Quebec's North Shore, the Anishinaabe nation of Lac-Simon was evacuated. Further north, in the municipality of Chapé, people were able to go back home after being told to leave earlier this week. In Sept-Îles, they're still on alert. Authorities said Saturday the fire didn't gain much ground overnight. 10,000 people have had to flee their homes there in the last few days. The federal government announced it's deploying 100 members of the armed forces to the area Saturday, and another 100 will arrive Sunday. Quebec's Wildfire Management Agency says it will train 100 of those deployed soldiers so they can join firefighting operations as quickly as possible. Additionally, Sot-Feu says it will be mobilizing another 200 firefighters. Meanwhile, all eyes are on the weather forecast. Dry conditions are expected for the next few days, with wind coming midweek. Paula Dion-Perez, CBC News, Montreal.
You are looking at a live shot of the Port of Vancouver. It wound up being a very warm June day indeed, but how long will that summer-like weather last? Well, I'll have your 5-day forecast coming up next.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On June 13th, join CBC's Rudy Kelly at the Alumni UBC's free webinar with Dr. Jeanette Armstrong on revitalizing Indigenous language. Register at alumni.ubc.ca and register for the CBC's Indigenous Pathways to Journalism program. This paid 9-month learning and development opportunity supports Indigenous candidates to hone their skills as storytellers. Learn more at cbc.ca/pathways.
And let's take a look at your 5-day forecast now. We'll start with what brought us here. There's this high pressure system that's really been in place for really much of the weekend, and that'll continue. Here's our current temperatures across the region. Still very mild right around the lower mainland, quite seasonal right now. Here's our outlook overnight. We're currently at 16. Overnight will stay clear, still in the double digits for our low of 10 degrees. In the morning, lots of sunshine. We'll hit a high in the 20s for the lower mainland, and over the next few days, that's only going to pick up right across the interior as well. Here's tomorrow's forecast. Province-wide, 29 degrees for Cranbrook. That is an area, the Kootenays, where we could see a chance of some lightning. Of course, that is bad news for the wildfire situation, but overall, very mild, very nice. If you look at the north coast, though, Dease Lake, there is a special weather statement in effect. Lots of rain there. In fact, some flash flooding possibilities with landslides, and so just to watch out for there. Otherwise, nothing but sunshine. Here we go. Midweek is when we're really going to heat up. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, at least into the mid-20s. That'll translate in the interior and through the Okanagan as well into the at least mid-30s as well, with nothing but sunshine. So lots of heat on the way. No rain in sight for the foreseeable future for much of the province. And that is your late news for this Saturday. Of course, for news at any hour, you can always head to our website. We're at cbc.ca/BC. Your next local newscast is on CBC Radio 1 on North by Northwest. That starts tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.